It is a cold morning at a training camp somewhere in America. The year is 1943. A young man, 18, maybe 19, stands on the firing line with a rifle he has held for less than a week. His hands are clumsy with the cold. A sergeant is watching. He pulls the operating rod back until it locks. He takes the loaded clip, 8 rounds of 30-06 steel and brass, and presses it down into the open action. And in that single, careless half-second, the half-second every recruit must learn, he forgets to pull his thumb clear. The bolt slams home. 9 pounds of spring-driven steel close on his thumb at a speed faster than his eye can follow. There is a sound. Then there is a silence that lasts exactly as long as it takes the pain to reach his brain. And then the young man screams. He has just joined a club that hundreds of thousands of American soldiers would join before the war was over. A club nobody wanted to belong to. They called it M1 Thumb. And before this story is finished, you'll understand why a wound that never came from an enemy bullet became one of the most dreaded injuries a young soldier could carry. And why, 80 years later, men who survived Normandy and Iwo Jima still wince when they remember it. If you love the real stories behind the weapons that shaped history, the human stories, the ones the textbooks skip, take a moment right now to subscribe. This channel exists to keep these memories alive. Now let's begin. To understand the wound, you first have to understand the rifle. In 1936, the United States Army did something no major army on Earth had dared to do. It threw out the bolt-action rifle that had served it through the First World War, the beloved M1903 Springfield, and replaced it with a semi-automatic, a rifle that fired every time you pulled the trigger, without working a bolt by hand. It was called the M1 Garand, named for its quiet Canadian-born inventor, John Cantius Garand, a machinist who had spent decades perfecting it at the Springfield Armory. When the war came, the Garand gave the American infantryman a staggering advantage. While a German or Japanese soldier worked a bolt between every shot, the American could fire 8 rounds as fast as he could squeeze the trigger. General George S. Patton, a man not easily impressed by anything, called it the greatest battle implement ever devised. He was not wrong. More than 5 million were built. The Garand carried American boys across North Africa, up the beaches of Normandy, through the hedgerows of France, and island by bloody island across the Pacific. It was, by many accounts, the rifle that won the war. But every machine has its secret, and the Garand's secret lived inside the way it was loaded. Most rifles of that era and most rifles today feed from a magazine. You drop the magazine out, fill it in your hand, snap it back in. Simple, safe. The Garand did not work that way. John Garand's design used a fixed internal magazine that was loaded from the top through the open action with a single U-shaped piece of steel called an en bloc clip. The clip held 8 rounds locked together in a staggered row. You press the whole clip down into the rifle as a unit. And here is the part that mattered. The moment that clip seated fully home, the bolt was released. It snapped forward on its own, stripping the top round out of the clip, slamming it into the chamber, and leaving the rifle ready to fire. That forward snap was violent. The spring that drove the bolt was one of the most powerful in any infantry weapon of the war. It had to strip a fat 30-06 cartridge out of a clip and chamber it with absolute reliability, in mud, in snow, in the chaos of combat. The engineers built it strong on purpose. But a spring does not know the difference between a cartridge and a thumb. Here is how it happened. The recruit would press the loaded clip down with the broad pad of his thumb. As the clip seated, his thumb was still resting on top of those 8 rounds, and at that exact instant the bolt was freed to fly forward. If he pulled his thumb back fast and clean, all was well. The bolt would close on the round and the rifle was ready. But if he hesitated, if he was cold or tired or distracted or simply did not yet know, the bolt closed on his thumb instead. It drove the soft flesh and the thumbnail straight into the steel face of the receiver. Veteran shooters described it the same way for generations. It was like smashing your thumb with a hammer swung at full strength. The result was a deep, crescent-shaped blood blister that bloomed black and purple beneath the thumbnail. Sometimes the nail cracked clean down the middle. Sometimes, in the days that followed, the whole nail blackened, loosened, and fell away entirely, and the soldier would watch a new one grow up slowly underneath. It was a small wound. It would not send a man home. It would not earn him a Purple Heart. And that, in a strange way, was exactly the problem, because the M1 thumb carried something a combat wound did not. It carried shame. Think about who these young men were. Millions of them. Farm boys from Iowa, clerks from Brooklyn, mechanics from Texas, boys who had never held a real military rifle in their lives, suddenly pulled into the largest army the nation had ever assembled and handed a complex, powerful, unfamiliar machine. They were trying to prove themselves, to their sergeants, to the men beside them, to the fathers and uncles who had gone before them. And the M1 thumb announced your inexperience to the entire world. You could not hide it. The blackened, swollen thumb was a visible mark, a badge that said, plainly, this man is new. Drill instructors knew it on sight. A recruit limping in from the range, cradling a throbbing hand, told a story without saying a word. He had let the rifle beat him. He had not yet earned the machine. There was a grim saying that passed down through the ranks, and it survives among Garand shooters to this very day. There are two kinds of men who shoot the M1, those who have gotten the M1 thumb and those who are going to. It was, in the truest sense, a rite of passage. Almost no one escaped it. The injury became so common among new soldiers that historians point to it as one of the distinguishing marks of a fresh recruit in the training camps of the Second World War. The bruised, blackened thumb was as much a part of becoming an American rifleman as the haircut and the uniform. And here is what made it feared in a way that's hard to explain to anyone who has never stood on that line. It was not the pain alone, though the pain was real and immediate and unforgettable. It was the dread of it. It was knowing every single time you loaded that rifle that the steel was waiting. That one lapse in concentration, one slow thumb, and the bolt would find you. Men who would later walk into machine gun fire without flinching learned first to flinch at the loading of their own weapon. A soldier could grow used to many things in the army. But the soldiers who trained on the Garand carried a small, constant awareness in the back of the mind, the knowledge that the rifle could bite, and that it would bite anyone who grew careless, no matter how brave, no matter how strong. That is the strange power of the M1 thumb. It humbled everyone equally. The remedy, when it finally came through repetition, through thousands of loadings until the motion burned itself into muscle memory. The Army taught the technique, and the veterans passed it down. You did not press the clip with the soft pad of your thumb hanging carelessly over the action. You used the heel of your hand, the hard base of the palm, to drive the clip down, keeping the thumb riding high above the receiver, pointed toward the muzzle, out of the bolt's path. Or you used your support hand, the one cradling the rifle, to hold the bolt handle back while you seated the clip, then released it in a single controlled motion. You pressed the clip, you cleared your thumb, you let the bolt fly. Press, clear, release. Do it 10,000 times and it becomes invisible, automatic, a thing your hands do without thought. That was the difference between the green recruit and the seasoned rifleman. Not courage, not strength. Just 10,000 repetitions and the scar tissue of a lesson learned the hard way. By the time those young men shipped overseas, most of them had paid their dues. The blackened thumbnail had grown out. The flinch had become a clean, fast, practiced motion. They had earned the rifle, and now they would carry it into the worst places human beings have ever made. And here is the part of this story that gives the M1 thumb its real weight. For so many of those soldiers, that small, throbbing wound was the very first injury they ever received in service to their country. Before the shrapnel, before the frostbite of the bulge, before the sand of the Pacific beaches, the first blood many of them shed for the war effort was their own thumb, caught in the bolt of their own rifle, on a quiet training range thousands of miles from any enemy. It was the wound that marked the beginning, the threshold a boy crossed on his way to becoming a soldier. And there is something almost unbearably human in that. These were not yet the hardened veterans of the newsreels. They were kids, fumbling with a cold rifle, learning a hard machine, paying a small painful price for a lesson that might one day keep them alive. Because the same fast, brutal bolt that bit their thumbs was the bolt that would chamber the next round faster than any enemy could, in the moment when speed meant the difference between living and dying. The rifle that hurt them in training was the rifle that protected them in war. The bite and the blessing came from the very same steel. So what does the M1 thumb leave behind? It leaves a bond. Ask any man who carried the Garand, and the mention of M1 thumb brings the same flicker of recognition, a wince, a half smile, a shake of the head. It was a shared experience that connected an entire generation of soldiers, a million private moments of pain that together became part of the story of the greatest generation. They all knew it. They all survived it. And in surviving it, they joined something larger than themselves. The rifle outlived the war. The M1 Garand served on through Korea into the early days of Vietnam, and it lives still, in the hands of honor guards, in the precise drill of the Marine Corps silent drill platoon, in marksmanship matches where old men and young shooters alike still load that en bloc clip the same careful way. And still, every so often, even now, a thumb moves a fraction too slow. The bolt closes. And another shooter, 80 years later, learns the lesson those young men learned in 1943. The wound never killed a single soldier. It never won a medal. It will never appear on a list of the war's great sacrifices. But for the men who lived it, the M1 thumb was as real as anything that happened to them in uniform. The first hard lesson of war, taught not by an enemy, but by the rifle they would come to trust with their lives. It was the price of admission, the toll every man paid at the gate. And the boys who paid it, who grew their thumbnails back and learned the clean, fast motion and carried that rifle across the world, they did not just learn to load a weapon. They learned, in that small and painful moment, that they had become soldiers. If this story moved you, if you remember these men, or carry their blood, or simply believe their stories deserve to be told, please subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and tap the bell so you never miss the next one. These memories are worth keeping. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.